Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Ash Shanab, and I am the Head of Business Development here at RFI Global. Thank you for joining our episode 1 of RFI's Business Banking and Payments series. Today, we'll be talking about opportunities to meet SME needs. In the second and third episodes, we'll be talking about future directions for SME payment ecosystems. That will be on Monday, 27th of November. And the third one will be on revolutionizing SME banking and unveiling the surge in fintech adoption on Thursday, 7th December. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, a little bit about RFI. We're an insight partner to about 400 or so financial services, technology, and payment providers. We specialize in financial services. And we run research across 49 markets, spanning across 75 studies. These are ongoing studies where we speak to 500,000 consumers, 100,000 businesses, and 20,000 merchants globally every year. We ask them everything about their usage, attitudes, future intentions towards banking, wealth, and payment. Today's insights will be coming to you from our SME banking study in the UK. This is a study that has been running since 2016, where we speak to 1,000 SMEs every year. John Ruston, our head of insights, will be walking you through the content over the next 20 minutes, and then we will open it for Q&A. If you have any questions during the running of the session, please feel free to post them in the Q&A section in the toolbar at the bottom. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to John, and I will see you towards the end of the session. Thank you very much. Over to you, John.
Thanks very much, Ash. Good morning, everyone. As Ash said, a quick intro to myself. John Ruston, Head of Insights here at RFI, looking exclusively at our SME banking research across the globe. This is a topic which is very close to my attention, something which I'm really passionate about. So I'm really looking forward to diving into some of our latest insights. So a few of the key topics which we'll be looking through today, I think we can all agree it's been a very turbulent macroeconomic climate, a lot of change within the market, very much so an evolving landscape. So we'll be looking at some of the key challenges which are currently facing SMEs within the market. What are some of their future aspirations or some of their main objectives? And therefore, what are some of the key mechanisms for support for financial institutions to help facilitate growth and ambition and untap the potential of what we see within SMEs within the market? We'll then have a look at how this has impacted some of SMEs' evolving needs, and again, some of the potential unmet needs which we're seeing in the market. So again, the real opportunities to stand out and build unique propositions moving forward. And then we'll look at this again with the same lens from a product-related perspective. What are some of the key products to bear in mind when focusing on tailoring SME propositions moving forward? And then, as we know, there's been a big shift in terms of how everyone, consumers and SMEs, are interacting with their banks on a weekly, a monthly and a yearly basis. But what does that optimal service model look like? We know there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach to servicing SMEs' needs. But what does something like the optimal service model look like, and where can we envisage this going into the future? So that provides a snapshot of what we will be covering. So without any further ado, let's kick off and dive into some of our latest business sentiment metrics. So on this first slide here, on the left-hand side is where we'll focus our attention initially. So important to recognise some of the top 5 challenges which are facing SMEs within the market. So as we start off from the left-hand side, we can see typical factors such as growing the business sales and revenue, managing cash flow, and increasing competition starting to emerge as the most prominent challenges. And given that the significant downward pressure that's been placed on SMEs over the last 3 to 4 years, this is very much understandable that these are some of the primary concerns and challenges for SMEs. As we can expect, this is particularly more prominent among smaller SMEs, so those which we would define as micro, so it's businesses that have up to 500k in annual revenue, and sole traders in particular, where they haven't been able to withstand some of that pressure that's been faced with them through various COVID lockdowns, changing regulation across the board, and some of the global supply chain factors and shifts that we're starting to see within the market as well, very prominent trends and emerging themes. The fourth item that we see there in terms of staying on top of change and regulation is something which is hovering around that one in four level. And we see this being a slightly higher in prominence for those that operate within the primary industry and consumer services. So it's in various kind of goalposts shifting in terms of regulation here. Sustainability factors definitely being one key element. And then when we move forward into some of the top aspirations for SMEs, it's very important to look at some of the downward pressure that's been placed, but how businesses responding to these challenges, essentially. So as we can see, although there has been downward pressure placed on SMEs, we can see that there is returning optimism within the market. We can see that growth with SMEs expecting to increase their annual revenue over the next 12 months. But due to the downward pressure that's been placed on the business, we can definitely see some element of consolidation where businesses are definitely geared towards driving operational efficiencies, and this has had an impact there when we look at that third column and third attribute, increasing business savings and cash reserves. So that downward pressure from a macroeconomic perspective has led to increased consolidation and looking to navigate the turbulent challenges that we've been facing. But then as we move forward into a couple of slides time as well, has had an impact prominently on savings intentions. We'll dive into how to build unique saving products moving forward as well. As I mentioned, we can see that return in optimism, so we can see intentions to invest more within the business and launch new products and services also growing. So that return in optimism is something which is particularly strong. Now, so with that in mind, very important to stay on top of some of the evolving SMEs needs and the key opportunities to support them, as I mentioned, over the coming years. So in terms of standing out within the market, what we have here are the top 5 drivers of main bank choice over the last 3 years. So these are based on all SMEs that we have within the market. So when we look from back to 2021, moving through to 2023, we can definitely see some consistencies. So although they are jostling for position, we can see competitive pricing and fees being the first bank that the business has dealt with. So that crossover between personal relationships and business relationship, how that evolves in the first instance, particularly on the small end of town. And also efficient and fast customer service. So as I mentioned, we'll be talking about the optimal service model. It's very important to still recognise the importance of in-person interactions and stuff, something that is very important not to overlook. But the two which tells a really prominent story here are the two, if we look on the bottom on the 2021 column, so the purple attribute and the green attribute, where we have reputation for business banking and good digital solutions. So then as we then turn our attention and move through the ways, we can see here that reputation sits above good digital solutions in 2021. As we move into 2022, we can still see reputation clinging on to the top 5 positions. It's superseding good digital solutions. It actually sits outside the top 6, so outside the top 5 in 6th position, I should say. So it stays consistent at that 1 in 4 level. Then as we move through into 2023, we can see that good digital solutions are now superseding reputation. So this tells us a really important story, and something very important to recognise is that reputation alone is not enough in terms of standing out in the market among SMEs. It's all about the strength of the proposition. How can you tailor a channel experience which resonates and really attracts SMEs? And it will be the same from a product related perspective as well, and really harnessing those opportunities and creating and facilitating those ambitions moving forward. So as I mentioned, we can see that the trade-off between reputation and good digital solution. Here we've highlighted some key differences across the industries, and definitely something we'll be talking about over the next 15 minutes or so, is that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to product propositions, and particularly from a servicing standpoint. And that's the case when it comes to attracting SMEs towards the institution. But what we can see consistently across the industries is that prominence of good digital solutions. So that green metric flows through pretty nicely across all industries. Now, consumer services is the exception here to this, where we do see a greater reliance on in-person contact. We traditionally see that some of these businesses are on the smaller end of town and looking to navigate, or have navigated, some more pertinent challenges, particularly when we throw back to the COVID-19 pandemic, where brick and mortar locations had to go into lockdown. There's definitely been a significant downward pressure. So there's definitely still a reliance here on in-person contact to help kind of navigate some of these challenges. But something we'll be talking about as well is how do we blend these two factors together, particularly from a service related perspective. And we can start to understand how it transpires when we look at the prominent unmet needs within the market. So something we're very passionate here at RFI about is we don't want to just provide a metric and look at a top line view. We're always very interested in understanding and digging beyond and understanding the why and the so what behind every measure that we see and every trend that we are tracking. So here we have the unmet needs over the last 3 years. Now, how we go about this, we track a range of advocacy related measures within our studies, and we follow that up with experience related factors across 20 or so different attributes and facets of SME banking. Now, these attributes that we see on the screen are those which are of high importance in driving advocacy, but are falling below SMEs' expectations. So we can see some patterns starting to emerge. Understandably, we see pricing fees coming through pretty prominently, given the rising cost and the fees and charges associated with products. So pretty prominently we see that coming through. What we always say is about demonstrating value through propositions. It's not just about lowering and slashing costs to stand out and be more competitive. It's all about demonstrating value through propositions. And we can identify some of the ways to do that when we look at some of the other associations here. So I've mentioned the role about in-person service and advice, and how to translate that and integrate that best through digital. We can see the importance of having a single consistent point of contact from an advisory related perspective as a pain point as we move through into 2023. Understandably, we can see access to finance and lending, which is always going to play a critical role for SMEs in terms of propositions. But the one continual thread that we see here is demonstrating commitment to the business's long-term growth, where it's been a continued unmet need when we throw back to 2021. So demonstrating commitment to long-term growth, the first port of call is the key opportunity to continue meeting SMEs with needs within the market. But what do we mean by a commitment to businesses' long-term growth? Well, essentially, this can be broken down into two fundamental factors. One element is, as I said before, the service-related perspective cannot be overlooked, especially as we move through into more of a digitized landscape. We're seeing very strong digitalization within the market. Innovation is something which is particularly strong, particularly prominent for SMEs in terms of banking, but also their own business models, and facilitating their growth and navigating new challenges via new channels. So very important to be able to recognise the importance of having that quality service provided by key contacts. The one way to demonstrate commitment, another way to demonstrate commitment to long-term growth is through the proactivity that having this solid advisory relates to, and then being able to have that tailored approach to businesses. And then therefore you can offer the right range of products to meet SMEs' needs at the right time. So as mentioned, it's not just having a broad brushstroke to this and saying that this product is going to meet everybody's needs. As businesses start to scale, their needs become more complex, and their products and the solutions which they need are going to be slightly different to those which are on the smaller end of town. We also see slight differences on what role this can play across industries as well, where we can see among primary SMEs, there's definitely a strong appetite for innovation within digital banking. They have quite, I would say, sort of legacy solutions associated to some of their processes, but their aspirations to become more digital is something which we're starting to see become more prominent. Again, the range of products to meet SMEs' needs is something which is key across all industries, really, but we see that being quite prominent within secondary industry businesses, where we also see an increased demand for sustainability related products, which ties into some of their sustainability related ambitions as well. So in a nutshell, essentially, being able to demonstrate that commitment to SMEs' long-term growth can be achieved by establishing that strong knowledge of the business, being able to demonstrate that proactivity, and being able to reach out to SMEs at the right time with the right products and services that are going to facilitate their ambition and hopefully unlock the potential that we're seeing among SMEs within the market as well. So I mentioned products a little bit there to touch on the lending side of things, but very important to recognise how this has been trending in terms of appetite moving forward. So here, as Ash mentioned when he started off, this is a programme that we've been running within the UK over a number of years now. So this provides us the benefit of being able to look back over a considerable amount of time. So here we have data trending back to pre-COVID into 2019 to look at how the dial has been shifting and the appetite has been shifting from a product and propositions perspective. So we can see that cash management accounts are always going to play a fundamental role, particularly early on in the life cycle of SMEs. But we can start to see how that has particularly been trending over the last 6 to 12 months in particular. As I mentioned, that downward pressure placed on businesses has resulted in an increased likelihood to have efficiencies and take up savings accounts that we can see here. So this increased demand that we're seeing for cash management accounts is underpinned significantly by the intention to take up a savings product in the next 12 months. So the intentions for SMEs to do so are at their highest level over the last 4 to 5 years. So being able to have attractive savings account propositions is something which is going to be a really strong opportunity to stand out within the market and continue meeting SMEs' needs. We know that lending is always going to play a crucial role, and still very much the case. And we can see that lending demand peaks among SMEs within the threshold of around the 500k to 2 million mark. And across a lot of our metrics, that 500k threshold is what we identify as a tipping point in SMEs' ambitions, where their behaviours start to shift, their needs can start to become more complex, and they really look to turn the dial and then turn the screw in terms of facilitating their growth. So understandably, having suitable lending products to facilitate this journey is something which is essential. Then when it comes back to savings account, we typically see the demand being underpinned by slightly larger SMEs, so above the 2 million threshold, where they're likely to have a greater cash surplus and slightly more processes in place to be able to invest into the future and save some funds into the future, essentially. Then when it comes to an industry view, so that again, we can see that similar levels of appetite, very high appetite for the savings account product in particular, but we see across the board stronger product intentions or intention to take out a product in the next 12 months among businesses that operate within the primary and secondary industry. Now, when we think back to our business sentiment related metrics as well, one of the key factors that underpins this is the reason that we see greater aspirations to invest into the business over the next 12 months among primary and secondary industry related business. So therefore their product needs are slightly more advanced when compared to some of the other segments that we see here. So very important to recognise this, and therefore a key acquisition opportunity will lie in these two sectors predominantly when it comes to savings accounts propositions over the next 12 months. As I said as well, moving away from the deposits angle, we know that lending is always going to play a crucial role, and will very much embed an institution in terms of that relationship and create stickiness. We know that will always be the case within the market. So very important to recognise the emerging trends that we're starting to see in terms of top challenges that are faced by SMEs when applying for lending, and also recognising some of the opportunities to meet those evolving needs. So we'll start off on the left-hand side. So I think we can all agree that we'd expect to recognise, we can recognise some of these aspects here coming through in the top 5, such as long approval processes, having a high cost to lending, or not being able to obtain the required credit amount, or being able to access the business's preferred lending option. We're starting to see a few initiatives within this space starting to streamline processes, and particularly the KYC processes. If we think about embedded finance, for example, where a few institutions are advertising very fast turnaround times for loans, very fast KYC processes, which again facilitates that onboarding journey essentially, and a very quick access to funds is something which is driven for this, particularly from a short-term lending need. Now, as businesses' needs become more complex, and we see across industries and by business size, we can see that 500k tipping point again is crucial when it comes to looking for slightly more nuanced products. So the advice and support which is going to be provided by the institution is significantly more important here for this cohort when compared to some smaller size businesses. And then we can see when businesses scale further and are slightly more advanced in terms of their life cycle, we can see that complex products is a top 3 challenge for businesses that have a revenue of between 2 and 10 million. This tells us one thing again, that their needs are slightly become more complex, and some of the tailored lending products are becoming more pertinent, but also there's a role and an increased reliance for advisory and support throughout the relationship. And again, coming back to that commitment piece, this is a really good example of how to demonstrate commitment to businesses as being able to be proactive and identifying the product which suits the business here, being able to provide them support and transparency through the application process to ensure that is essentially the product which meets their needs for that particular time. Then when it comes from an opportunity standpoint, when we turn our attention to the right-hand side, so the orange matrix on the right, this works in exactly the same previous way as I mentioned before. These are the top factors driving advocacy of lending products that are falling below expectations. So I think we can move past interest rates. I don't think we need to spend too much time there, but to see that as an unmet need and a pain point. But there's a couple of elements we really want to focus on. We've mentioned advice and support. So again, really important to keep keep that top of mind really when it comes to being able to demonstrate that advisory through the relationship. The two to focus on here is the transparency in decision-making processes and flexibility, where we're starting to see some real drive in initiatives. So we'll start with transparency in decision-making. So what do we mean here? So here we're talking about if a business has applied for a loan, if they haven't been accepted for the full amount that they've requested, for example, is there a clear understanding and rationale behind that decision? Are they clear of every step they need to go throughout the process? Is the onboarding journey clear and seamless? All of that, again, kind of fits within the advisory related piece. Now, flexibility is a really interesting one, and something which we're keeping a very close eye on here at RFI in terms of how this is being integrated into propositions within the market. Now, before COVID, this is definitely something which was tracking outside of the top attributes when it comes to meeting SMEs' needs, and isn't something which we've seen start to emerge since we've had SMEs have the ability to be able to take repayment holidays to defer their payments. We've seen some slight initiatives within the market where SMEs can link and completely tie their repayment volume to their sales volume as well. So starting to see some emerging trends. As well, we believe we see some correlation, particularly when it comes to propositions such as a buy now, pay later. Now, I know that's not as prominent within the B2B space, but definitely when we think about the smaller end of town, there's definitely a crossover between business and personal relationships and experiences as well. So I think the increased demand for flexibility is something which is starting to translate. So this is definitely something we're keeping a close eye on, and we're very keen to track and to see how this evolves moving forward. And one final point goes without saying, when it comes to the lending process, having that seamless onboarding process, that solid acquisition route is something which, again, is a key lever to continue focusing on moving forward. And then finally, we've spoken about business sentiment, the impact on driving choice, some of the top line unmet needs, and the impact on products. But we know there's been a big shift in digital landscape and digital attitudes. But what is the optimal servicing model, and how can we go about servicing SMEs' needs to the greatest extent and really stand out among propositions? We've been hearing, again, a continual theme we've been talking about is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to servicing SMEs. And that definitely is the case when it comes to servicing. So it's not a case of saying, well, we've seen increased digital appetite within the market, let's just shift all of our processes to digital, and then that will just solve everything. It's definitely not going to be as straightforward as that. And that is identified when we look at some of our channel preference metrics. So in the center of the slide here, or the model that takes front and center, is that we need a model that works best for SMEs, that leverages the best of digital, but then also the best of in-person interaction. And everything needs to work seamlessly together along the right touch points to generate and create that seamless customer experience. So for example, if I take you through that model, when businesses are seeking advice, they actually prefer in-person contact. Now, we've seen some initiatives of how this is starting to be integrated through digital platforms, whether that's talking through a relationship manager via web chat, for example. But something which is very important to recognize is that SMEs still want to talk to a person when it comes to seeking advice or strategic advice about their business. So it essentially tells us two things. Advisory is in-person advisory is definitely strong in appetite, but also there's a potential knowledge gap for businesses when it comes to some of the solutions which are available to them. When it comes to searching for products, however, SMEs are more than happy to be autonomous. And then when it comes to something which is potentially more strategic, as we've spoken about the loan application process, the importance for in-person advice at the right time. We can see in-person is preferred for loan applications. But then when we move through into opening an additional account with an institution that a business may already have a relationship for, they're happy to do that via digital. So again, that tells us that one-size-fits-all approach doesn't exist, and being able to offer that most relevant channel at the right time is definitely the key, and kind of standing out from a servicing related perspective and meet those evolving needs from SMEs. Then move our attention to the right hand side. We've essentially highlighted some best practice and some key trends which are starting to emerge. So if we take it at the top, one thing that we see within our data, which is really prominent and ties in quite beautifully with this, is that we see from an advocacy related perspective, Online banking and the RM are the most two important channels when it comes to driving customer experience. So as I mentioned, being able to leverage that a customer experience that has the best of digital while incorporating in-person advice is the key in meeting those evolving needs. I've spoken about a couple of the initiatives that have been in play. We've seen some best practice globally. There's been an emergence of integration of video chat into online business hubs. There's been methods of how there's been a mobile app to connect with the RM, for example, to seek some best practice advice. We've also had quite a few business banking hubs starting to emerge globally, and online marketplaces where essentially businesses can interact, search for tailored products, search for industry advice and expertise. So essentially what the goal is here is to be able to streamline processes and those day-to-day tasks via digital. So having a really solid knowledge base that businesses can tap into for some of the fundamental tasks. And this creates the opportunity for in-person contact and the relationship manager to be freed up to focus solely on in-person and strategic advisory, essentially for the more strategic elements that the business is looking for. And that, again, is another key way where we can continue demonstrating long-term growth, commitment to businesses' long-term growth within the market. So that brings us towards the end of the sessions with some key takeaways. So we'll stick to around 3 key points that will be key in meeting SMEs' needs moving forward. So we've seen that SMEs are geared towards driving efficiencies over the next 12 months, and intentions to take out a savings product are at their highest level in the past 4 years. So we know that business lending has always played a fundamental role, but having attractive savings propositions is one way to start building a relationship with the business and through those attractive propositions. We know that digital solutions has now superseded reputation as a driver of main bank choice. So both traditional institutions and also neobanks and fintechs will all have to continue evolving their digital propositions to meet SMEs' needs moving forward. And we've seen that commitment to SMEs' long-term growth has been a continued unmet need within the market. And therefore, we know that the role of advice and support, as we mentioned, is crucial through the SME relationship. And that is no one-size-fits-all approach. So we need to leverage the best of digital at the right time while being able to incorporate in-person contact for strategic advisory to demonstrate that seamless customer experience for businesses. Thank you very much for listening to this snapshot of our latest insights. We will now open for some Q&A, and I will pass back to Ash to moderate.
Thank you, John, very much. This was really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to unpicking some of those themes with you. I want to say thank you to Steve, James, Anna, Mel, and Rishi for the questions that you've submitted. We'll hopefully try to go through this in a format that is, consistent with the story that you just told us. But if there are any other questions that we can't answer, we will try to follow up with you, but please feel free to reach out. My contact details are being shared on the screen as we speak just right now. So John, it was really nice to see the return in optimism across businesses, the increase in appetite for business savings. This is a new story that we have been supporting a number of our partners with, and a lot of questions we are receiving. Another theme we probably will be unpicking today, the drivers for main bank choice. I still see that the fact that this was the first bank I dealt with in my business to be a strong driver, something we'll come back to, and the commitment to business long-term growth, lending, pricing and fees, and all interconnected together with efficiency and speed of service. All of these factors are interacting and delivering a story which you are telling us there's absolutely no one size fits all. What I've heard from today's session is that it's a little bit more complex than that, but don't worry, we can tell you exactly what you need to do based on the persona or the segment that you are trying to cater to. It was really nice to see how some of the umbrella terms are broken down into very actionable points, especially around the commitment to long-term business growth. So let's start by talking about the increase in appetite for business saving. This is a new trend. You've shared some insights. What are some of the other questions that we've been answering for our partners in that area? And what would you say to those who are listening on the other side, who are trying to cater to that specific product in this market?
Thanks, Ash. And as you said, it's very much a hot topic at the moment, as we've demonstrated there with the data. The highest levels of intentions to take out savings of products over the last 4 to 5 years. So understandably, we are getting quite a lot of questions on this from our partners. So I think there's a couple of ways to look at this. One is definitely being able to recognise the appetite and build propositions which are attractive to SMEs. So looking at it from a product related standpoint, we've looked into the data. Is this going to be from a fixed rate product or an easy access product? So one thing that is driving this in particular, and obviously that does change through the life cycle of the business and the sector of operation. We're definitely geared towards at the moment easy access. So even though SMEs are looking to tuck their surplus cash away into a savings account, they still do want to be able to dip into that when required. So having attractive easy access solutions and propositions is going to be key. Now, as businesses do start to scale, we do see a slight tipping point. Again, once businesses pass that 2 million threshold, where appetite to take up a fixed rate product starts to catch up with easy access. So we know among the larger businesses, I would say, as businesses start to scale and become more mid-market, fixed rate propositions are something which is going to be particularly key. But more so for on the small end of town, as I've mentioned as well, there's still being able to deal with the lasting impacts of that turbulence which we've seen within the market. The reliance on being able to have that quick dip from an easy access perspective is something which is going to be key. Yeah.
Thanks, John. Very helpful. And actually, just since we are talking about savings, I'm keen to go into the lending area. We all know that one of the biggest challenges for SMEs is access to finance. It was really great to see that specific bracket at which that lending need peaks. You talked about the speed of approval process. It's an area I'm really keen to expand on, and maybe you could just share a little bit more light. Again, similar lines along what questions have we been supporting our partners across the savings and now with in this regard with the lending sector.
Yeah, thanks, Ash. Again, another great question. Is we always recognise the importance of building that relationship through a lending position as well. The main question I would say that we're getting through is particularly when we look, we're in a very competitive market within the UK as well. A lot of competing players within the space. So definitely in terms of that acquisition opportunity, what are some of the key drivers? And I mentioned digital, and from a digital perspective, being able to have that right blend of a quick and seamless application process is something which is going to be fundamental, particularly for a short-term lens where we've seen some initiatives through embedded finance where those processes are becoming more streamlined. So that's something to bear in mind, that the process is as easy to understand as possible. Now, of course, we've spoken about the fact that in-person advice is still relied upon when applying for loans. But again, this be able to demonstrate that the digital application process needs to be able to answer all unaddressed potential questions that an SME may have. And therefore, you're then freeing up the time if a business does need to go to an in-person or to ask a question about their application or submit documentation, that is just as seamless as possible. So are there ways that the in-person contact can be integrated through that application process in a slightly more seamless way? And it's always about managing expectations here from a lending application process that we've been starting to see. So being able to manage the timelines and expectations, being able to demonstrate that transparency through that decision-making process, and as well as being able to provide all of the unanswered questions. And that we're then starting to see and having that right blend of digital application, being able to have documentation, which is digital as well, and having a fast approval process. But then also being able to then at the right time, if a business does need to go towards another channel, that everything feels like one seamless customer experience is definitely the key. And then nothing is kind of lagging behind and there's no friction points. So they are the really key things to top of mind. And again, we see that tipping point around that 500K mark to 2 million, where that's going to be particularly crucial. We see that injection, increased appetite for lending products.
Thank you, John. We talked about some of the most important or needed products or in-demand products by SMEs right now. You also talked about the action points for for a financial services provider to demonstrate that commitment to long-term business growth. So, and one of those was to be able to offer the right product at the right time. So I love how this is all interconnected. What would be the impact of this area continuing to be an unmet need on both SMEs and their financial services providers in today's environment?
That's a great question. Thanks, Ash. And again, I think we can look at this from a couple of perspectives. One, from an existing customer perspective, is that addressing commitment to long-term growth by demonstrating some of those capabilities, as we mentioned earlier, through a seamless understanding of the business and having a customer service related experience that meets SMEs' needs is fundamental. So being able to offer that from an existing standpoint is key to alleviate that pain point from an existing customer perspective. But also from a potential leakage perspective, we do actually see an increased appetite of businesses and SMEs which are likely to switch their main bank in the next 12 months if this need is going to be continue to be unmet, essentially. So around, we can see within our data, around 1 in 5 SMEs indicate a potential likelihood to switch over the next 12 months. And this rises to 1 in 3 among those that are that have an unmet need, particularly continued unmet need with regards to commitment to long-term growth and the factors associated to it. So having the right range of products, having that quality of service, advice and expertise is something which is going to be fundamental. So it does also lend itself to an increased appetite for switch. So potential, obviously, opportunities for acquisition. But from an existing customer perspective, it's very important to recognise to generate that stickiness. That is the one fundamental factor moving forward to bear in mind to create that SME stickiness in the relationship.
Thank you, John. And I'm being told we're running out of time, but one final question. I don't want to close today's session without talking about this bank. Was the first bank I dealt with when I started my business. This really highlights the importance of the initiation and the onboarding process and the starting the relationship. What would you can take us out with remarks on that point? Any thoughts?
Again, great question. So thanks very much for that one. So I think firstly, particularly on the small end of town, so micro SMEs, we know that customer journey is very much led through personal experience. So there's definitely crossover between personal and business banking related. We know that from a product standpoint, where in their infancy, SMEs are using personal products to service some of their banking needs. Now, when that transition and that time comes to then open a business account, whether that's a typical current account or even looking to have a business card for a perspective or business lending product, we know the likelihood is to turn to the existing bank. So being able to demonstrate those capabilities from an early standpoint, from an acquisition standpoint, is particularly key. But being able to continually evolve and meet their needs as the business scales is something which is going to be fundamental. So it's, again, not just having that one-size-fits-all approach when taking that business into the SME world, so to speak, being able to then meet their needs as SMEs then continue to evolve through the right products, through the right service and related channels. So again, particularly from a customer experience related perspective, in those early days, there's definitely going to be a lot of comparisons to how a SME wants to bank compared to how their personal experiences, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all consumers. So there's definitely a range when we think about a digital perspective. And we've spoken about digital needs a little bit, but I think this is a great question which allows us to touch on to this point. So you think about how we interact with other digital platforms and other digital innovations which we're starting to see within the wider market. We know that there's kind of a benchmark which is going to be played here from a digital and services related capability to those wider experiences which we're seeing. So very important being able not to be able to replicate that, so to speak, but being able to understand that there's going to be a benchmark which is going to be played and going to be had in terms of some of those wider digital experiences. And again, being able to continually evolve those digital capabilities. And when it comes to, we've seen access for innovative products and services. Now, that doesn't mean we have to go towards innovation for innovation's sake. It's about just having that solution which best meets that need at the right time. And I think, again, that brings us back to our commitment piece. Being able to recognise those unique opportunities for the business at the right time from a servicing and from a product related standpoint over the next 12 months is the key to meeting the evolving needs of SMEs.
Thank you very much, John. This was really interesting. It's really unfortunate we don't have time to go into some of the global best practices that we have at hand. I know we run the study across a number of other markets in Asia Pac, North America, and across EMEA, but hopefully in another session and another time. Just a reminder, thank you so much for your time. Just another reminder for everyone, you will be receiving a recording of this as a follow-up. I'm really sorry we weren't able to address all of the questions. There's been quite a few of those, but please reach out. My contact details are on the screen. We'll be more than happy to help. Our next webinar on Monday, 27th of November at 10:30 a.m. is going to be talking about the future directions for SME payment ecosystem. So please remember to join us, and thanks again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you then. Have a lovely day.